Okay, so we're going to start off with the last piece here is Norm Morse is going to talk about the Open Scalable File Systems Inc. And after he does that, we're going to plunge right into our panel on the future of Lustre. And we've rounded up most of our panelists here. And so Norm, take it away.
Okay, thanks. So it occurred to me that perhaps some people don't know what Open Scalable File Systems is, so I thought I'd use the title slide to try to explain a little bit about Open SFS. It's a nonprofit corporation. It is paying attention to scalable file systems that support supercomputers. Right now, we're totally focused on the Lustre file system that I suspect everyone knows and loves. So it's a nonprofit corporation. I have to admit this is not the first nonprofit startup in California that I've been involved with, but it's the first one that was intentional. So so think of Open Scalable File Systems as the formalization of the user group around scalable file systems. You can think of it as a co-op or a cooperative. It's not really technically, legally a co-op or a cooperative, but it has that sense. It's people working on common problems, combining resources, and using those resources to pursue solutions to problems that are common to the group. It's a user community, and it actually is, under California law, a mutual benefit corporation. So that's Open SFS. We're very lean. We have 2 part-time employees who are official employees of Open SFS, and all of the work is done through working groups with volunteers from the organization who are members of Open SFS. I got this last night, and I thought, okay, it made some points that I wanted to make. It has good statistics, and it has good motivation for the Lustre file system. This is an English language translation of a workshop that's going to be held in China later this year, and in fact, I think Whamcloud is a sponsor of this. So the things that I wanted to bring out here actually talk about the Lustre file system. So this article explains that the reason people like Lustre is because of its I/O performance, its scalability, it's an open source system, it's hardware neutral, has POSIX compatibility, and this article claims that it's become the most popular distributed file system in the HPC domain. So according to the latest top 500 list, Lustre is used on 8 out of 10 of the top 10 supercomputers and 70% of the top 100 supercomputers on the top 500 list. So the people putting together this workshop that's to be held in China claim that the wide deployment of Lustre is an irresistible trend. So what I wanted to do is address some of the questions about Lustre. Is Lustre dead? It's not. And there are a lot of people who are very much dependent on Lustre, who have a huge investment in that system and who are going to continue to make sure that it's a viable system into the future. So the environment we currently find ourselves in, and I think Paul may have a history of Lustre slide that talks more about this. There have been a lot of acquisitions. Companies have been acquired, and they've ended up in places that may not particularly fit with the business plan of the place where they ended up. So all of the people who are very much dependent on the Lustre system for their success were worried about making sure that this system is continuously available in the future. So I'm going to say that the future might have been unclear at one point, but that's in the past tense. It's nailed down now, and it's clearly going to be available to the community in the future. OpenSFS was specifically created to bring clarity to this situation and prevent, and more importantly, to prevent this from happening again. So The people who created Open SFS are the same people who caused Lustre to be invented in the first place, and the same people who insisted that it be an open source system available to the entire community, to people who need to use the system. Okay, so what's the mission of Open SFS? There are a lot of sites, again, who've spent, I've heard, as much as $80 million creating the system at their sites, some of the big supercomputing centers. They're totally dependent on Lustre for their continued success. And they have to have an unequivocal path forward for the support and development, plus the evolution to exascale. So you'll notice this corporation is called Open Scalable File Systems. It's not called Lustre File Systems Group. So it's a recognition that Lustre is exactly the system that we have today and that everyone uses. But in the future, it could evolve into something else as the exascale systems are pursued. It's probably like Fortran. No matter what it is, it'll be called Lustre. Also, there's a lot of consternation about new sites considering what file system to use. And if you're a center manager, you're probably not going to choose a system that you're not going to perfectly clear is going to be around. So again, new HPC sites considering Lustre have to have the same unequivocal path forward. So again, OpenSFS was created to guarantee this required path forward. Okay, as I said before, it's like a cooperative. It formalizes the user community. Technically, under California law, it's called a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation, and it is incorporated under California law, which has caused us some grief. We might choose something different if we had this to do over again. So OpenSFS participants pool our resources to generate the required open source support and development for for scalable file systems, which again is Lustre today as we speak, to benefit the entire community. Okay, from the beginning, we thought a very important mission for OpenSFS was to generate a war chest, or a pool of funds, if you will, to fund the development that's required by this community. The only way we do that is through member dues. So we thought it was very important to generate enough money, enough funding to take care of the development and support that's needed by the Lustre community. As is probably clear, the more participants we have, the more funds we generate, more importantly, probably the more good ideas we have, the more help we have with the correct management of this user community, the way that the funds are spent, helping us define requirements and respond to them correctly. So we're inviting everyone who's interested in open scalable file systems, Lustre, to join this community and help us manage this correctly. In formation, we tried to use the model of some successful open source organizations that exist today. So it's roughly founded on the Linux Foundation model. We've got several levels of participation, and at each level you have more responsibility into the organization proportional to the amount of funds that you're putting in. So Cray, DDN, March Livermore, and Oak Ridge were the original founders at the promoter level. Each of those organizations is putting in $500,000 a year in dues to fund open scalable file systems. At this level, those organizations have a board seat. I will say that we have established, according to an agreement at the last LUG meeting, we've established a community representative board seat so that the two lower levels of participation have representation on our board. And we've gone through a nomination, and we're in the election process, and we'll make that announcement shortly about who that board member will be. We've signed an MOU with European Open File Systems. Again, all of this stuff, I mean, we're really making it up as we go along, trying to figure out what the best way to handle these things are. So there was discussion initially about whether the European organization would be members of our organization or whether we would be members of theirs. It turns out that it's advantageous for them to have their own organization because there are some funds available to them, or they used to be before the economy crashed, in the European organization. So we decided to do this as separate organizations, but we have signed a memo of understanding between the two groups so that we have a lot of reciprocity as far as attending meetings, setting priorities for improvements to the system, those kinds of things. So we have a peer organization, European Open File System. From the memo that I showed initially, there is a possibility that we would have additional peer organizations, perhaps out of the Asian community in the future. So what we're striving for is one community, one Lustre community worldwide, and we're all working together toward the same goals. The next level of membership that we have is adopters, $50,000 a year. Indiana University, Whamcloud, and Sandia National Laboratory are at that level. Supporters, $5,000 a year. We have RAID and SGI. Initially, there were other organizations spun up to try to achieve, maybe in a different way, the same goals that we're after. Again, at the LUG meeting, there was a lot of negotiation, and so the net result was that people who were members of those other organizations would transition into Open SFS, and there are concessions about dues that were paid to other organizations and how they could easily transition into Open SFS. So I've named some of the people here at the bottom who are transitioning. In addition to those, there are actually a lot of companies whose names you would recognize who are in due diligence and are working toward participating in Open SFS. Current events. So all of our corporate documents were invented when we all thought Oracle would probably hold a canonical definition of Lustre. And so everything was written in such a way that we could easily pass patches, changes up to Oracle to be included in the canonical definition. It turns out over time that that's probably not going to be the way things operate, so we've got a lot of warts on our bylaws that try to accommodate that aren't needed. So we're trying to clean them up at the moment. So the bylaws that we have are posted on our website. You can see there what it is. We've already made some modifications to recognize the current environment, and we're going to go through yet one more stage of changes, and we're going to try to move to as close as we can get to the Apache model for contributions. So I won't go into detail unless you're interested, but it's a lot of legal garbage about ownership of who knows what, and patent rights, all those kinds of things. So we're going to try to streamline that because we're not in the environment where we have to pass those changes up. As I said, there's a board member position that's been created to represent the adopters and supporters, and we're about to announce that person. We made changes to the bylaws to allow our peering agreement with the European groups. And we made bylaw changes to allow the transition of folks who had been members of other organizations to come in Open SFS. And I hope I never have to have another session with a lawyer. It's just amazing. So we signed the MOU, I mentioned that. This is something that I really like. I mean, this is why this organization was invented. What we wanted to do was gather requirements from the user community. What's going with Lustre? What do you want to see changed? What enhancements do you need? Our technical working group gathered up those requirements, prioritized them, proposed to the OpenSFS board what were the most important projects we could undertake quickly. We put out an RFP to address those requirements. We got bids back. We went through a rigorous RFP process, and we've just let our first contract. It went to Whamcloud. It's for as much as $2.1 million over the next 2 years. We're already looking at the next level of changes that are needed. So there are two things you can do in Lustre, probably more than that, but you can do development or you can do support. Under support falls things like, where's the canonical tree? Who's the gatekeeper? What changes are approved? All those kinds of things. So the first contract we let was under the sort of development category, and maybe Brent will want to talk more about it later. The next thing we need to look at is, okay, what about the canonical tree? Who holds it? What makes sense for the community? Again, we may not have the best ideas along these lines. So I would say if you are interested in Lustre, interested in scalable file systems, interested in OpenSFS, please come join us and help us figure out what's the right thing to do about these things. Other things we have going, we're going to have a joint OpenSFS and European file system birds of a feather session at SC11. Actually, there's going to be two of them, one on Lustre itself, one on open source software in general. We actually are going to have a conversation with Oracle in mid-October to talk about some of these issues, the intellectual property that's owned by those folks, what's the best, we're going to propose what we think is the best way to deal with it, how the canonical definition should be handled. So we hope to get to that. In the past, there have been, I think because of all this legalese around ownership, patents, all that sort of thing, that are we really going to be open source? Yes. Open is our middle name. Well, maybe it's our first name. So everything's going to be open source without question, and it'll be available to the entire community. We would like the entire community that's interested in this area to come and help us and make this the best we can. We do our work through working groups. These are volunteers, mostly from the organizations that are participants in OpenSFS. What we've done in the past is if a particular organization is going through the joining process, doing due diligence, we invite you to come and participate in whatever working group is of interest to you. You can look at the charters for the working groups on our website. And if you're interested, please contact the leader of the working group and come help us get this right again. There's a join tab on our website if you want to look to see what's involved in joining. So we think that with the worldwide organization that's been put in place, any questions about the future of Lustre are being answered, and we think we have a nice little box of chocolates here, and there are a lot of chocolates left with we're willing to put your organization's name on them to help us with this. And the last thing I'll say is the obvious. Questions, comments?
Have a question from one of the
You're not allowed to ask questions.
I was just going to suggest you mentioned the EOFS Lustre user group meeting in Paris.
Oh, yes. Well, let's see. That is the last week in this month, in September. Yes, right. In Paris, there is a Lustre user group meeting being sponsored by EOFS.
26, 27.
Yeah, right. Last week of September. And don't forget the log. We'll have another log next year.
Yeah, Tommy Minyard is the guy responsible for putting on the log in 2012, so
So I do want to comment on that. We had our very first Lustre user group meeting that was being actually organized and planned by the actual users, it wasn't planned or organized by Oracle. Well, we're going to continue that this next year, and we actually hope to run that through Open SFS to keep some continuity between the years.
Cool.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I apologize for my ignorance. But
Oh, no worries.
did ZFS get incorporated, and is that part of the open source? No.
There's an incompatibility in the licenses. CFS is CDDL, Luster's GPL. I can go into this offline.
No, I'm just wondering if ZFS was part of the technology going forward. The answer is no.
Not
Thanks.
currently.
That's not quite the right answer. There's an incompatibility in the licenses, so marrying ZFS and Lustre and shipping that as a package will not go forward. We are, however, developing the appropriate layers in Lustre to marry to ZFS on Linux, which is a port that Livermore did. So you will be able to install this yourself and have ZFS underneath Lustre at your own installation. Vendors will not be permitted to marry the two together and ship a widget that is ZFS under Lustre due to the compatibility issues in the license. And it's not ZFS's fault here, by the way. The GPL requires anything married to it to be GPL.
Anything else? So, Paul.
So I think what we will do now is proceed with our panel. Norm has sort of addressed a bit some of these questions, but we're going to try to get some other views on perhaps some of the issues. I have so we have assembled an august panel of Lustre experts to address this question of the future of Lustre. We have Peter Bojanic from Xyratex, Bob Ciotti from NASA, Ames, Brent Gorda from Whamcloud, John Josephakis from Data Direct Networks, Tommy Minyard from TACC, some other guy who just spent some time talking, and Steve Sims from Indiana University. As Norm mentioned, Lustre has a past as well as a future, and it's basically a 21st century file system here from starting at, and it has sort of wandered around in a way, right? So it started at CMU with Peter Bram in 1999. He started Cluster File Systems in 2001, 2003. It was basically Lustre 1.0 was released. 2007, the CFS is acquired by Sun. 2010, Sun is acquired by Oracle. And 2011, Oracle seems to not be much interested in pushing. Yes, I think I stole this this last characterization from Open HPC or inside HPC or somewhere. Is that where I stole it? Right. Okay. That's so. Anyway, so I have prepared a few questions for our panelists to see what we can do about where Lustre goes from here, and so I might mention that three of our panelists are. What I would view as users of Lustre, three are suppliers of Lustre, and Open SFS, it looks like it's a little bit of each, right? So we'll see how their respective answers to our questions go along. The first one is a question is a big softball here that anybody ought to hit out of the park, but about what do you like best and or least about Lustre, and I think we'll start with Peter here and just go down the row. So you get to go first on this one, anyway.
So I got to see a lot of the ups and downs of Lustre over the years. I was actually with Cluster File Systems through a lot of the turmoil, through a lot of the wins and a lot of the turmoil. So the best are kind of the obvious ones. It's an open source file system. It's the most scalable file system in the world, massively parallel. And so those are what I love about it. That's what everyone typically loves about it. I think one of the things that I'm increasingly loving is the strong user community around it, right? It just tremendous user support. We have users who have organized, put together tons of money, put out contracts in order to ensure the longevity of Lustre. That is just remarkable support. And springing from that also is an increasingly vibrant community of developers, right? Lustre used to be maintained by one small commercial company, Cluster File Systems. Now we have a growing number of developers and vendors who are doing innovative things with Lustre. So those are all the good things. I'd say that the least good things or the worst things about Lustre is that compared to a lot of other file systems that run at its scale and even kind of its vintage in terms of maturity, it lacks a lot of the data management capabilities that you would expect out of a mature file system that's a decade old. And it's going to, and I'd say that the other thing is this fragile history, right? CFS was a small company perceived as perhaps didn't necessarily have a lot of staying power. When Sun acquired Lustre, a lot of people kind of gasped and thought that was going to be bad. Turned out to actually be pretty good. And then when Oracle acquired it, everyone gasped and said it's going to be really bad, and it turned out to be really bad. And so that's kind of left a lot of the world with this perception of the fragility of the future of Lustre, which I completely agree with Norm. It's got a vibrant future. A lot of those risks are gone, but it'll take years for us to shed that turmoil off in the broader community.
Best, I think, echoing some of what Peter was saying, I like the fact that life sciences folks at Indiana University can push their data sets very quickly. I had one user who wrote me a delightful note that said he wanted to divorce his human wife and marry the data capacitor, which is our large-scale Lustre system. That was pretty cool. I thought, man, it's really great that we've got two sealed doors between the outside and the data center. Yeah, that is a lot of love. So, worst metadata performance. I've got a geologist who has like a zillion 4K files, and he likes moving them a lot. Yeah, that's a bad trip for us. Best also is the fact that it's open. I mean, when we first got into Lustre, we used it as a site-wide file system. We have a lot of collaborators from other institutions. We discovered pretty quickly that you could use Lustre across a wide area. But the difficulty is having heterogeneous namespace. You want a homogeneous namespace. So we were able to develop some plugins for the metadata server to permit a UID mapping between locations. And we couldn't have done that unless the product had been open.
I'm going to echo some of Steve's comments here. Really, for us, the best thing for us is the scalable performance. Not only at lots of clients, but also even the single node performance when you take advantage of InfiniBand and some of the high performance networks that are already on a lot of these HPC systems. Again, the least is probably from our point of view, again, metadata performance. We have similar users with millions of files in one directory, and trying to list it or do anything in that directory is extremely slow. I do know that they're working on improvements in that in the current working versions and future versions. So the other thing I'll a little bit different from Steve, but another aspect that's a little bit challenging from a system administrator point of view is dealing with all the log messages when something does go awry with the file system. Actually tracking back and trying to debug when the problem actually occurred and what actually occurred is a bit challenging. You can be inundated with logging, and again, that's something else that we're all trying to address in the community.
Something along the same lines, again, scalability and I think open source are the two things that stick with me in terms of positive things. And then on the least positive, the fact that Lustre has gone up and down over the last 10 years or so. That has caused a lot of headaches to the community, and as a result, we see from time to time the fact that Lustre is not moving forward as fast as we can because there are so many questions. So I think over time that has been something that's one of the least favorite, presentations or discussions. I've had to go tell people, oh, don't worry, Lustre is going to be alive and kicking, and it just takes a lot out of it every time we have to kickstart Lustre, so that's something of a negative to me.
So similar comments. I think the what do you like best for our primary compute system? It's got about 12,000 nodes on a single InfiniBand fabric, and it's converged with Viz and Archive. And so without a system that's scalable like Lustre with performance, we wouldn't be able to architect something like that. The cost structure for a large deployment like that is very attractive. So our currently, when we think about deploying a file system, it's going to be on the order of 3 or 4 petabytes of storage, and we'll have multiple file systems like that. So because of the structure of the software being divorced from the hardware, we're able to track hardware improvements that come from multiple sources and compete that. And so that is something that feeds into the cost model, creating competition on hardware platforms and sharing the risk with the OEMs of the hardware on the software side. So we have a lot of talent on site to deal with Lustre-specific issues. The least has to do with reliability. Anytime you have something at scale, you're going to have issues. Tracking down where they're at requires a very high level of expertise. Tracking bugs, fixes, and patches. So on the server side, there's quite a bit of maintenance for server revs and server versions, and how to get from one to the next is difficult in an operational environment where you're up 24/7. Some of the other challenges, we haven't really figured out how to use technology like SSDs or high IOP drives in combination with low IOP, high bandwidth devices, segmenting data and metadata in a way that makes sense, and then you might even take that down to the RAID level. So that's something I think that's coming, but not just sort of not there yet. Another thing I think that's an issue is it's very HPC community specific, and in order for us to, I think, move things forward with Lustre, it really needs to have wider enterprise adoption, so that the cost of maintaining and pushing development upstream is spread out over more organizations. And so I think that's, really critical for its healthy long-term survival.
So it's kind of hard to be on the tail end of answering a question like this. So I'll say I agree with everything that's been said. One thing that perhaps I bring to the table that's a bit unique is that 13 months ago I was a Lustre user, and prior to that at the Department of Energy I was the person writing checks to get Lustre developed. So as Eric Barton likes to say, I'm the gamekeeper turned poacher, which is an English expression. I managed to live through some of the downtimes of Lustre where it was flaky and unstable. So the thing I like about Lustre right now is that the current versions are actually quite stable. And credit here goes to Sun and Oracle after them and the Hyperion project at Livermore. And that was where Livermore stood up a test cluster that was pretty sizable, about 100 teraflops, 1,100 nodes, and let the Sun guys beat on Lustre for about 2 years. Peter was part of leading the team there. And what emerged was a release 185, I think, that is pretty stable and gets us to the point where today we can actually sit here and talk about moving forward with the Lustre file system. So I think that's a really good point for it. As a vendor now who has to feed my geeks on support contracts, the thing I like least about Lustre is its stability.
So I won't repeat all the stuff that's been said. I agree with. I do think it's extremely important for us to get our arms around this, to look at the history, what's happened to Lustre, how do we get ourselves into this situation. and make sure that that never happens again. So we've really got to work on that. We got to get this out of the hands of the scungy vendors.
You're looking at me.
Yeah, so I was, okay, so actually we encourage audience participation. So if any of you happens to have a favorite yay Lustre cheer or a Lustre gripe, not at this time. Okay, well, we keep marching along. You'll still have some more chance to put your piece in as we march along. So we're going to question 2, which is really kind of follows on question 1, and that is basically, what should happen to Lustre? What to lead to broader adoption? Actually, of course, it shows that it's pretty. It was 70% of the top 500 or something is running Lustre. Well, what's with the other 30, right? Why aren't they?
Yeah,
doing
it's 70% of the top 100.
Top 100, okay. So what about the other 30%, right? What's going to take to bring them along, and anybody else? So why don't we start this time with Tommy?
So from our point of view, for broader adoption, it's got to be an easy to install and manage system. I think this is still one of the biggest challenges from our point of view. We've been dealing with Lustre since, I think, we started with the 1.4 version, so we had already let them work a lot of the kinks out. But even for them, it's being able to install it, you got to have the right kernel version. We run our own special kernels with some extra things in it, performance counters, InfiniBand driver stack. The combination of all these pieces is a bit difficult to manage from a system administrative point of view. So I can imagine that the small labs and the universities that want to deploy it, they don't have the manpower effort to devote to solving some of these things. Now, like Brent was saying, with 1.8.5, a lot of these issues have been resolved. They come with kernels, they come with the OFED stack. You get all the pieces that you need already pre-built that you can install. But still, managing it, operating it, debugging issues, making sure you've got good performance. All of these are extremely challenging things that the part-time system administrator is not going to have the expertise or knowledge to handle. So for wider spread adoption, it's got to be real easy to deploy and use. Some of this also is, and we see this happening already, is better integrated with the Linux kernel. And we see some of this stuff going into the Linux kernel, moving upstream, and it's just a slow process. It's become a hard development process with the Linux kernel and trying to keep up with the latest versions. So from our point of view, to really get it adopted and widespread, these are the 2 issues that we need to solve. And then once we get all the university students, graduate students, and everything interested in using Lustre, then when they go out in the community, then we'll see more industry adopting it.
Okay, I guess we'll go this way. So the same thing with us. I mean, a lot of questions from the community come around ease of management and stability of the systems, and stability has come a long way. So ease of management is another one. And then going one step further, where Tommy touched at the end about the commercial use, some of the features that the commercial customers would want, like HSM capabilities and things like that, need to come into place for Lustre to take the next step. Not to be just a university file system, basically, or research computing file system, but to become an enterprise level file system. Those are some of the things that we need to deploy. I don't think metadata, although metadata is more key for research computing, I don't think that's as much of a need in their environments as some of the other additional features that we know have been on the roadmap and continue to be some things that we need to tackle. And I guess as part of Open SFS, that's something we're proud that we need to move forward with the development of those features.
So for adoption, I think lowering the learning curve, making it easy to try out, that's probably, how do people do this in their spare time instead of for their full-time job. Creating stable releases, I think there has been a lot of improvement. There is some interaction between the file system and the underlying hardware that is, there's still some holes there. And as with ZFS and handling correction and data integrity, gets pretty close to the hardware there. And so you really want some interaction and some improvement there. Better tracking of bug fixes and patches. I think that's gone a long way, but there's still, I think, some progress to be made there. Identifying potentially corrupted files. So clients can have state and be evicted for various reasons. Servers can go down. There's often the case that Lustre, the big Lustre, knows where the data is that's been corrupted, and we want to pull that out so that we can say, okay, file X is bad, and do something with it. Another feature that I think would be very useful is an administrative shutdown function. So we want continuous availability of the system. I think enterprise wants continuous availability. And so how are you going to roll out upgrades? How are you going to maintain the system? Bring clients to a known good state, so if they have a problem during an administrative shutdown of the system, that you lose less data or corrupt less files. And so those are things that I think will be valuable upstream.
So again, it's hard to disagree with the folks in front of me here. One of the things that we are working on, though, is a management tool which is called Hydra. We'll be demoing it at SC. We're starting to install it at sites now, but it will simplify the management of Lustre. One of the big areas that I think would increase the adoption of Lustre external to HPC are experiments that we're doing with things like Hadoop, where we see the exceptional bandwidth of a global file system widely applicable to the Hadoop applications that are running, and better than the Hadoop applications that have to do cross-node communications. So you're not having to read from your neighbor's disk, you're reading from a global file system. In our talking with that community, there's a lot of excitement about this sort of feature enhancements to Lustre. Data replication, for example, so that if there's a problem on an OSS, you can continue running. These sorts of features, I think, will broaden Lustre to other communities and increase the base upon which the HPC community relies, and will make it better for all of us.
So I was teasing the vendors, but I think what I really think is that they're doing a marvelous job of addressing Paul's list of things here, and things really are improving technically with the system. I would say for greater adoption, broader adoption, I think we have to get rid of the perception of any risk in using the system. So a data center manager can easily make the decision and sleep well at night that everything's going to be okay, that the system's going to be around, it's going to be supported, and it is a viable system. So I guess I think that's a major thing for broader adoption.
When we look at adoption, in a lot of cases, we're talking about the HPC realm. We're talking about high performance, scalable, the roots of Lustre. And in many respects, a lot of the things that we're doing right now are the right steps to broaden the adoption in the HPC space. People in the HPC space kind of are drawn to Lustre because they reach scalability requirements that just can't be addressed by anything else. But the other realm of growth for Lustre, and possibly a much bigger one, and I know that all of us have talked about this in the past, but it's not as prevalent in this community group, and that's the global namespace kind of realm. That's more enterprise space, and that's where Lustre has traditionally kind of not in its comfort zone, right? The data management capabilities, ease of management, ease of use, but also things like better support for multiple types of protocols, right? So that it's easy to deploy into an enterprise environment, and all of your NFS and CIFS clients, and eventually even PNFS clients can all just talk to it. I think that that's going to be kind of a more difficult mile for us, because all of the existing incumbents don't necessarily think in terms of enterprise storage. We're really kind of entrenched in our perception of HPC storage. But I think that there's an enormous opportunity there for growth in Lustre as well.
So, echoing what you're on about, sort of narrowing the focus a bit, when we deployed Lustre as a site-wide file system, I guess this was 2006, we ran 10 gigabit fiber out to different laboratories. And these guys were using Linux as data acquisition systems. What we're encountering now is data acquisition systems that are using Windows. And so, we're using Samba exports, which are slow. Man, it sure would be cool to see a native Windows client for all these scientists that are using, Windows data acquisition systems, so that their workflows will be much easier. You push the data onto the file system, and then you can use your big cluster to analyze the data that you've taken. Yeah, with that, I'm going to shut up.
Does PNFS scratch your itch?
All depends on where the itch is. I know, Hi. I've been recorded by you before. Can you edit this out? Potentially that could happen. I mean, again, this would require sort of, shaking hands and kissing babies with the appropriate researchers and making sure that things are set up. And, rock steady is what we're looking for. Push, pull, click, click.
Okay, Lustre and Windows. I guess that's something I would not have thought of. Anyone in the audience have any? Oh, do we have a microphone somewhere?
Hey, so as the Microsoft guy, there's some code sitting at Oracle that's pretty far along to get Windows up and running to talk to Lustre servers.
I've heard this.
I've had about this much luck getting them to return my telephone calls to promote that or to release that code. So, what I'm doing from the Microsoft side is funding the PNFS work at City, so that when that comes out on Linux, it comes out simultaneously on Windows, and that should give us access, hopefully, to Lustre at that point. But that's the theory as we get to closer release on that, right? So, but again, if anybody has any kind of pull with Oracle and can pull that code out, we could really build a native Lustre client. So
it's tough. It's interesting. There's actually been, this is probably about the 4th attempt to integrate Windows and Lustre, right? First, we did a PSIFS client, which was parallel SIFS, and that was based on a proprietary library, and that wasn't open source. And then we did another iteration of a native Lustre client, native Lustre protocol, based on a proprietary library, and that wasn't open source. And then there was another attempt. There was actually 2 attempts inside of Sun. I don't know what happened to the second one. I think it was probably just neglected to death. So good luck. It'll be good if you can do a PNFS version.
Hi, since I now work for Network Appliance, what's the future, the positive and negatives of Lustre appliances?
I think Xyratex.
You go.
Lustre appliances are a double-edged sword. Everyone wants them. No one wants to be locked out of them, right? Everything that we're talking about here about getting the right versions of all the software layers working properly from your SCSI driver up through the OS to Lustre, you're right, that's all hard. And there's things that could be made easier, like getting more of the kernel-specific patches adopted upstream. Most of them have been, and that last little mile is a hard mile to cross, and I think a lot of hope has been lost that the kernel community will adopt those. So there's all the complications of integrating the software stack, but even then, everybody's storage platform performs differently, and so the entire tunings of everything in that software stack, including the Lustre tunables, is in itself an entire engineering act. And anyone who's done this kind of integration themselves You know, DDN's been doing it for years. All of us know that it's a lot of engineering work, and you can't hide the complexity. The complexity never goes away. You will always be stuck with the complexity. And that's the advantage of the appliance model, right? Is that a vendor has taken care of all that kind of stuff. This is largely the approach that we're taking at Xyratex. We're taking care of all of those things, making sure that everything is tuned, that the performance that comes out, you know, that you get the performance that's on the tin, right? It performs as advertised. But then there's the flip side of that, right? And especially in the high-end HPC sites where we're used to tweaking and tinkering and introducing our optimizations and so forth. And so there's a lot of resistance to saying, well, it's entirely a black box and you can't do anything with it. That just doesn't fly in a lot of sites. And a lot of the innovation that's happened at data capacitor, things that have happened at a lot of places where the people have done really innovative things with Lustre wouldn't have happened if people couldn't have tinkered in some way. So it's a careful balancing act.
So a couple of things, you know, to add. I mean, we see it all the time that, you know, again, it's a black box. It's something that comes to you and you can use it as an appliance. However, we get to a customer side, and yes, you put it in and you turn it on and it works. And then the customer says, oh, by the way, I want to use something that's one-off. And you are at that point going to tell them, well, that is not certified, that's not a solution that you can deploy. And again, it goes back to engineering resources, and everything you do, by the way, and everything you touch has to be a certified solution, and that takes a lot of time. So if tomorrow, for example, you get a new version of an InfiniBand HCA or a 10 gig card or a new version of drives or a new version of Lustre patch, you as a company providing a turnkey solution have to certify every single component. Otherwise, you're not doing your job right. So that can be very taxing, complicated, and you have to, again, talk to all the different groups that you touch at any given time and make sure they fall in place. And then again, like Peter said, you have all these customers that say, oh, this is great and fantastic, but I want to do something different. And if you don't let me do it, that's not really an open source solution, because you have your own version of Lustre and OFED and InfiniBand and whatever it might be. So it's a catch-22, and you might have to find the right customers for each end of the spectrum. And that's why DDN frankly offers both versions of the product. So some of the customers will say, you come, plug it in, and we will not touch it, and we'll take it as is. And some of the users that would say, no, we want something that we can upgrade, we can work on ourselves. And then you have to do a double, basically, engineering effort for both.
Question. Back here, back in this corner. It started as a question, now it's a comment. My question was going to be, could we get rid of half the lawyers and get a marketing person around Lustre? Because we actually have a Lustre appliance, and we do very well with it. And our salespeople spend more time, oh, by the way, full disclosure, I run HPC at Dell. My name's Tim Carroll. We spend more time saying to the customer, I swear to God, Lustre's stable, right? But we are selling Lustre more than selling the appliance, right? And so what would help, I think, is that if we were able to pool some of those resources to talk about Lustre, let the vendors come together, Dell, HP, IBM, DDN, whoever it is. Let's let people see customer reference stories across all platforms. I don't care. Rising tide lifts all boats. But let's get some resources behind lifting Lustre's story in general together, because it's one thing that's missing, because there's open source from a technical perspective, but open source doesn't have a marketing department. And the reality of it is we all need to make money doing this. And so we need somebody else to be doing that heavy lifting on the message, so that we, in turn, the vendor community, can then use that as a vehicle to drive the business forward. Just a thought.
But so can the Open SFS fill that role, in your opinion? If there's strong support for Open SFS and they're carrying the marketing message, it seems to me like they could carry the water for us.
I don't know how Open SFS feels about getting put on the spot with that question.
They got lots of lawyers.
They'll probably come back
and they
to me
want to
for-
get rid of them.
Come back to me for a check later on. Well, I figure the lawyers are making $500 an hour. Yeah,
I
that's
agree
like
with
a
you,
lot of
Tim. It's a matter of, you know, as many members as we have. I think if we can hire some marketing people, salespeople, whatever, and get rid of lawyers, I'm for it. So I fully agree, and maybe this is an action item for the community that we can take up, and you know, maybe we can sit down and see if we can have an evangelist or that belongs to Open SFS who is vendor agnostic, and that's fine.
I don't think that it would take much, but it would need to be vendor agnostic, and Dell would be 100% behind a vendor agnostic Lustre push.
Yeah, in fact, Open Scalable File System has in place what we called a communications working group to address some of this stuff. But again, with all the stuff that's going on, that group kind of got bogged down in all the other minutiae that we've been dealing with. So yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. It's something we should do. The community should support it. We ought to all do it together. So.
Tomorrow's a new day.
Indeed.
I would just reflect our experience that the stability issues are mostly on the very large deployment. So on smaller systems, so that may be on the order of a petabyte on a few hundred client nodes, those are very stable. They typically aren't maintained at the same revision levels of software. So we're not changing them a lot, we're not growing them. And so those systems, the MTTI on the software stack for Lustre specific, including the hardware, is very, very high.
So maybe we can lever it inside HPC for some part of that too.
Happy to help.
So I think we'll move on to whatever question 3 is here and see what kind of discussion we can generate with that. This is a good one. So I don't know how many of our panelists are going to be willing to admit that there might even be an alternative to Lustre, but here's the question. Is there anything that you might move away from Lustre in the future? I expect maybe our user panelists might be more interested in answering that than but everyone gets a chance. Why don't we start with Bob?
Well, I think that there is, in the enterprise space, a need, and somebody will fill it eventually, and it's going to be Lustre or something else. And so when that happens, I don't know. Right now, on the big system, we're running 5 NFS servers that are mounted on all 12,000 nodes. So we're using NFS on a big parallel system successfully. One of those is a scratch file system that users will use for their scientific modeling output for applications that have access patterns that don't work well with Lustre. One of the things we do on our Lustre servers is to turn off the read caching, and we're doing that because in order to effectively cache the second level metadata on the OSS, if you have read caching on, you can flush that, and then that plays havoc when users want to stat their files or update, tell me how big things are out there. So parallel NFS could be a natural follow-on. Which layer is on the back end is sort of a question, but I think eventually that there will be a need, or there is a need, and it'll be fulfilled with something. So.
Keep going that way. Of course.
You want to go, Sims?
No.
My answer is pretty short. I mean, we love Lustre, we use Lustre, but there are members of our organization that are looking at Ceph, that are looking at Fraunhofer. So our eyes are open to whatever else is going on. But I mean, for the foreseeable future, we're a Lustre shop.
I have to say, it would take us take a lot to convince us to move away from Lustre at the current time. Basically, it would have to meet the same performance, capabilities, scalability we already see with Lustre. It would have to have additional features that would make it more attractive than Lustre, which I just don't see anything in the near future that's anywhere close to meeting this. And the other key fact is it's got to be open source. I have guys on my staff that actually dig into the code. try to do bug fixes, feed it back into the community, identify, targets, easy targets, low-hanging fruit for improvements and monitoring management of the system. So, for our point of view, there's nothing in the foreseeable future that, in the next 4 to 5 years. But, like Steve, we're always going to keep our eyes on the current technology and what's out there. And if something comes along, we're willing to adopt it. It's just right now I don't see anything that's competitive with Lustre.
So for my money, we just spent the last 2 or 3 weeks responding to the DOE Exascale RFI, and I'd like to leave the current Lustre behind us at some point and evolve it forward.
So there's a lot of reasons why people might leave for other file systems. What's interesting though is that I know a lot of users who actually run Lustre and other file systems. That Lustre is the unparalleled file system that they use for running their large scale jobs, but they like to keep their data and manage it long term on something else that's got HSM capabilities, or in really savvy enterprise environments, they're hedging their bets, right? They know that the choice of file systems and storage products is a long-term game, and you have to be constantly evaluating the alternatives. So, it's used in some low-risk areas, and perhaps advanced into higher risk areas as the product matures. So it's not a simple question of are people going to leave Lustre and go to something else, or are people going to adopt Lustre from something else? It's kind of a complicated evolution.
So DDN, over the last few years, we sell a lot of file systems, different file systems, and in some cases, like Peter said, we have people that have moved away from Lustre and moved to Lustre, and it's because of different experiences, and you have people that have had bad experiences for the wrong reasons or for the right reasons. So you see an array of things out there. But I think at the end of the day, Lustre has a lot of benefits, and despite the ups and downs in terms of stability, especially in the past, and the community changes in terms of ownership and seeing all that, I think Lustre is here to stay. The only thing that I think scares us away, and basically answering the question, why would you move away, is the only thing I think is if the community doesn't grow, if OpenSFS wasn't here maybe, and the community around it being so passionate and strong to keep this going, I think that's the only way that people would move away from Lustre, because like Tommy said, and Bob and Steve, I mean, Lustre has brought a lot of benefits to the community and to the users, and it has come a long way thanks to a lot of hard work from a lot of people. And I think the only way people would go away is, again, if the passion goes away and the demand is not there.
Yeah, Paul, go back to question 2 for a moment.
We already did question 2. You're too late.
Okay, so metadata performance, in particular the single metadata server on the present Lustre that an ordinary user has access to. What is Open SFS or any of you gentlemen that are Lustre developers going to do about that? And this relates to question 3 with regards to why you would think of going away from Lustre.
Steve, I'm so glad you asked that question.
So Whamcloud has at least 2 development contracts right now, and the major themes of this are SMP scaling for the metadata server. Historically, there's been one metadata server, and it's not been parallel itself, SMP parallel. And so it was unable to take advantage of multi-core and multi-socket multi-core. So there's a lot of that code that was developed at Oracle that unfortunately will not make the 2.1 release, but is being integrated into the next release after that. 2.1 should be out kind of any day now, definitely by the end of September. The other piece of this is that the group at CFS had attempted to do the scalable metadata, what was it called, clustered metadata, a couple of times, and it turned out to be just too hard of a rock, and they broke their axe on it several times, their pick on it. What we're doing now instead is we've got a contract through the OpenSFS to take a half step towards clustered metadata. If you imagine being able to put a single directory on a metadata server and another directory on a second metadata server, you can have as many metadata servers as you like with using the same data storage, the same OSSs. In that way, you can isolate a user, isolate a directory, get scalable performance, not necessarily for a single directory, right? One directory, one metadata server, that sort of thing. We've got the second half of that work already architected, so if money shows up for it, we would then be able to do the full clustered metadata, which is a single directory being able to operate in parallel across metadata servers. So this is code that's going to land in the next, between now and 13 with the Open SFS contract.
And this is an interesting illustration of kind of the long history and the tightly knit community, right? Brent was at Livermore writing the checks to do clustered metadata while I was at CFS trying to implement it, and it was a heinous problem. It was a heinously complex problem, but Lustre 2.0. The open secret is clustered metadata is Lustre 2.0. It's in there, but it doesn't deal with all the recovery scenarios, so it can't actually be turned on. But Lustre 2.0 is the culmination of a lot of the work that went into clustered metadata, and Whamcloud are taking that the next step to be able to actually realize some stability of that for a number of, for some reasonable constraints. But it's been a long roadmap and a lot of work done by a lot of people in multiple companies now.
So, Steve, I'll claim that the process is working. So the OpenSFS technical working group actually went out to the community to try to find out what the most important improvements, development efforts were for the community. And we hit yours. And that's, we've already let the contract for the first part of it, and the second part of it we're working on. So, yeah, I claim the process is working. And it's because of the passionate community and people getting involved. So we need you to get involved.
So this was a performance issue that hits us pretty badly at times. And so we looked a lot at it. It's pretty complicated. It's in Lustre, it's in Linux, and it's in the back-end devices and the number of transactions that they can support. And there's not all of the handles that you want in place to direct the metadata where you want it to high transaction rate devices. So adding an SSD, for instance, gets pretty complicated when you're looking at the device mapping and peeling off the inodes and then getting that state committed. And there's some work going on upstream that's going to help quite a bit. I don't think it's something that kills Lustre, though. I mean, from our perspective, because this is one of the reasons we're using Lustre is nobody else has solved this very hard problem, which is integrating a ton of distributed hardware in a big supercomputer and getting POSIX file system semantics to work for 500 jobs that are simultaneously running on a 12,000 node machine. That's a really hard problem, and it's inherently complicated, and it'll be a while before the metadata issue gets the attention that it needs, which I think is twofold. The things that have been identified as parallel performance, how do you split up your work in an embarrassingly parallel way, but also to up your sequential transaction rate for metadata coming in from any one server, and I think there's big gains that can be made in both of those areas.
So we'll try to go forward again to question 4. And I think that this has been addressed by Norm, but well, I don't think it's been completely addressed. And so, is there going to be one true Lustre, and exactly how is it going to work?
Yes, and I don't know. The yes part is there has to be one true Lustre, because if we divide a small community, none of us are going to survive. We have to all work together and push on this together. How it's going to work in the end, the way it's proven to work in the past is that there's one canonical tree and the vendors each draw their releases from that tree. That's a proven model. I think that's a fine model moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I think there has to be, and yes, we don't know how that's going to work yet, but there is, this is a topic of great interest. We have an entire day set aside, November 11th, I think, to discuss this. I'm sorry, October. But yeah, I think we all work together very well. I think it's a goal of every person at this table, probably every Lustre user, for there to be one canonical definition. That's the only way this is going to work. And we're all working toward that. So again, I'll solicit your input, your participation. We don't know how this is going to work yet. So somebody might be sitting there with a wonderful idea about how to fix this. So we need your participation. We need your input.
Let me just reassure you, fear not. There is one version of Lustre. So there always has been one version of Lustre. That was easy when there was one controlling party. There is one version of Lustre. Whamcloud are the present stewards of it. We all draw from that same tree. What Norm is referring to, and quite reasonably so, is we want to make sure that Lustre and the canonical source of Lustre can endure any one vendor, right? We've seen the past of having vendors control Lustre, and we want to ensure longevity. So the community hosted by Open SFS, EOFS, we're going to figure out the right path in the future. But right now, today, there is one version of Lustre, and it's hosted at Whamcloud, and that's where Xyratex pulls from, and I'm pretty sure that's where DDN pulls from. That's where all the users look to. So please do not have any misconception that Lustre is fragmented or scattered. There's one version of Lustre today. And I think that, every conversation I've ever had with any of my users, with my customers, with my competitors, we all agree on the same thing. It would be the worst thing for the future of Lustre in this community to let it fracture and fragment and be fragmented. And I can honestly say that every conversation I've had, everyone's agreed there has to be one.
So just in case somebody sinks Brent's battleship, at IU we're mirroring the goods, so I'm pulling for you, man, but just in case.
Steve always hedging his bets. Yeah, again, echoing the same comments. I think everybody agrees here. As an end user, if there's not one version of Lustre, then the community is just going to fracture too much, and we'll see it go the way of the dinosaur.
I mean, same. Yeah.
So I rewrote that just as another question in reference to, AIX, HPUX, Solaris, or Linux. Could the hardware OEMs carry the software development cost of their own Lustre at the price point we're willing to pay for storage? And I think that answers the question, because they couldn't, that's proven out today, right? And it's the same sort of development model, I think, that we'll see going forward, that they wouldn't be able to do that.
So I might make that take this question a little farther, right? And so could I ever anticipate the day when I would get a metadata server from Xyratex and my object storage from DDN and have it work together, and get my client from I don't know where?
So the other part of that answer is that there's always been derivatives of Lustre. So there's always been one canonical tree, and there is still a canonical tree, but there are always derivatives, almost always derivatives, right? Livermore has got a derivative, and the reason is because they've got peculiarities to their environment and some specific things that other people don't necessarily need. Sometimes you need to freeze a point in time and say, I'm going to make all these bits and pieces work together, and in order to be able to do that, I can't pick up every single bug fix and that ... release from Whamcloud. I need to kind of stick with this, and maybe I'm going to backport selective things. In the past, the deltas between the canonical source and some of the derivatives has been very, very wide, and I think that we all learned through some really hard times that's a tough go for any of the vendors and for their users. So we've all come much, much closer to the tip of the tree, but expect that there always will be derivatives. And so to answer your question, it might be really difficult it might be really difficult to split that cluster up, right? The cluster itself is a thing that works. It's an integrated unit. The whole is greater than the parts. And although it's an interesting idea and not technically impossible, I would be surprised to see kind of mix and match parts. Although, with OST pools and the way that Lustre is going in the future, it's not at all inconceivable that you might have parts of your distributed cluster that are kind of one technology from one vendor talking to other parts. So maybe it's actually not far-fetched an idea at all, but I don't know.
Well, if I may say, I think you could probably use part numbers, but I don't think you see a lot of people, for example, buying 200 blades from Dell and putting them next to 50 blades from IBM and 20 blades from HP. They usually are islands on their own. And in the same way, yes, could you put them next to each other, change BIOSes and managements and make them work? Probably yes. But do you want to do that? Probably no. So it's in the same way, storage, like, think of it as a cluster of different blades, and would you do that or not? So.
My boss's boss really likes to have one throat to strangle when things go wrong. So, distributing the throats might be a problem.
Okay, so unless I've lost track of my slides, I have exactly one more question, and that basically is I want to give an opportunity for each of our panelists to tell us what their individual vision is for the future of Lustre. And who would like to go first? Okay, go ahead.
Going first means I get to actually add some value here, hopefully. So I think the overriding message for me is that the Lustre is back. It's as strong or stronger than it's ever been, and it's owned by the community. One of the things Whamcloud has done in future releases is we've made sure that the copyright is not owned by any one individual, including ourselves. Oracle owns it, Whamcloud owns it, Xyratex owns it, the DOE owns it. Nobody can take the 2.1 release of Lustre and do anything with it without permission from all of the copyright owners. And I think that means it belongs to the community, and that's a good spot for it.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. The vision that I would have is that Lustre belongs to the community. We control it. We own it. We use our processes to decide what development and support are going to be provided for Lustre. I think, again, a broken record, I'd like for as many people to join Open SFS as possible. It is a formalization of the user group. There are low monetary levels of involvement, but not only do I need your funds, I need your brains, your good ideas on how to make this move forward. I also think that we can't be complacent. I think Lustre has the highest performance available for HPC systems at the current moment. That has to continue. I think we do need to look at moving it into the maybe not so high level systems as well. Indiana University is looking at wide area file systems and how those might be applicable to a larger audience. So anyway, bottom line, community owns it. We need to be good stewards. We need to make sure the performance continues to follow our needs, meet our requirements. So
I just would say that software maintenance and development is very expensive. And that the way that I see Lustre, it's still in a period of transition. And the way the community behaves, and that's both the users and the suppliers of hardware, the server OEMs, will have a long-lasting impact. And through various means, providing resources towards future Lustre developments, I think, and support of it is an important issue for us to address as a community.
So my two sense are, again, I agree with what we said, and we've come a long way, and yes, it's expensive to maintain, but I think and hope that Lustre will be able to extend itself to the commercial environment with whatever is needed, reach out to different markets. Otherwise, Lustre is going to become, something that, 50 organizations at the most might use. So I think it's very critical for us and strategic to do what Tim Carroll was mentioning earlier, go out there, evangelize, and put in the features that are needed to take Lustre to the next level. I think we've come a long way. We should all be proud, but we should also look forward and put the necessary funding, development, ideas, and people to take it to the next level. Otherwise, Lustre is not going to be what we all hope it will.
Well, I'm going to echo some of the similar comments that they already had, but I think for my vision for the future of Lustre is I'd really like to see it wider adopted at the academic level. There's a lot of small, medium-sized clusters out there that could benefit from Lustre, and they don't even realize the performance gains that they can get. What I'd see as an audience takeaway for this is, well, Lustre's still a vibrant community. There's active development, active deployments, larger scale systems going in, and all of these things we do at the larger scale are benefiting everybody at the smaller scale by improving stability and reliability of the file system. So, what I'd like to see is definitely wider spread adoption in the community, and that's really what I'd like to see as a vision of future.
For me, the take-home message is my shirt. Choose Lustre. It's safe. It's going to have a future. What would I like to see in the future? I'd like to see more involvement in Open SFS. I think that, echoing what Norm is saying, there are lots of bright ideas out there about where we can go and, the directions that we should be taking. So join up. In terms of wider adoption, I'm all for it. In terms of my own personal interests, I'd like to see wide area Lustre developed so that we can, have distributed workflows between geographically distributed locations. Tag, you're it.
Lustre has never been better positioned. It's come out of a period of turmoil, but really coming out of the other side of this, it's never been better positioned for a good future. I'd like to see more vendors, more competition. I'd like to see more developers emerging, especially in academic environments. I'd like to see PhD studies done on analytics of the underlying data. We need a good solution for end-to-end data integrity that isn't wrapped up in complicated legal terms with ZFS. Something for the rest of the industry. There's so many innovations that need to happen that the vendors are busy just kind of taking care of business on the obvious stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff that we haven't even thought of yet that has to happen probably in academia. I want university students picking this up and saying, wow, I can do really cool stuff with this, and maybe I can get a job at the other end doing it, because we're hiring and we're looking for bright people with Lustre experience.
Do we have any more comments or questions from the audience? Or is everybody ready to bolt for the door? Okay, Steve says he's ready to bolt for the door. Let us thank our panelists for I thought it was a very stimulating discussion.